welcome back to Between the Pages. I'm your host, Grace Randolph, and we're coming to you from Midtown Comics in Times Square. And joining me once again for another episode of Comics to Movies is Alan Kistler. Hello, Alan.
Hi.
I know you're in the middle of transitioning right now, right?
Yeah, I'm closing up Agent of Style over at Newsarama. The column will probably appear somewhere else in a different incarnation, maybe just on my website. But I'm closing up shop with Newsarama. I've been doing a lot of stuff on CBR right now.
That's wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, and I just started my own blog again, a personal blog at alankistler.com.
Oh, cool. And that you're trying to do that weekly,
right.
So people should come and support you.
Yes.
And so that encourages you to do it weekly.
Right.
And there's a link to it in the video description. Last time we did this, we talked about Marion Cody artist Talia. And now today we're going to talk about the other surprise character, although a lot of people guessed it.
Yeah.
Is that John Blake turned out to be Robin.
Right.
Right? So, but a lot of people are saying he was like an amalgam of all the Robins.
I mean, he definitely seems to have elements of the first three Robins. Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, to different degrees.
Totally. I think he leans more towards Tim Drake than anybody else, personally. But so today we're going to talk about all the Robins and a little Nightwing as we go into talking about how they've transitioned from comics to film. But before we get started, who's your favorite Robin? Everybody has a favorite Robin.
My favorite in the actual role of Robin is usually Tim Drake.
Yeah.
I've liked in the past 10 years how some people, especially in the cartoon adaptations, have done Dick Grayson. Like I love Dick Grayson on Young Justice.
He's great.
Yeah, but in terms of when they were actually originally Robin, I think Tim Drake was my favorite. He was the most like a partner and like a real asset to Batman's world.
Well, I think a lot of readers today have grown up with Tim Drake because he's the first one to get his own title. He's the one who launched the Robin title. But me, I have to say, as anyone who watches this show regularly knows, I'm a Damian Wayne fan.
Damian Wayne's fantastic. I think he's a fantastic character. I'm loving how he's evolved. He's definitely very cool.
Well, I always say he's the male Emma Frost, and I like both those characters. So let's start from the beginning. Let's start from the comics. So, so Batman starts out as a solo character.
Right, he was a solo character, and we didn't even know much about him other than he's Bruce Wayne, and apparently for some reason he's acting as Batman. And it was a few months before we learned the whole his parents died and he swore to avenge them.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I think that Batman, even though he's so dark today, didn't start out very dark.
He started off as fairly dark, but that quickly went away. People act like, oh, he was dark for years and he was on his own for years. Like, no, he was a pretty dark character for about 6 months, and you know, slowly that started going away. Where he was, you know, a serious character, but not quite as dark, not quite as sinister.
The dialogue is light.
The dialogue is fairly light, and it's not like Robin showed up and then he got friendlier. He was actually already on that path.
Yes. So why did they introduce Robin? Why were they like, this guy needs a sidekick?
You know, there are a couple of reasons to introduce Robin. One was the fact that Bill Finger, who's really the writer of Batman, he was tired of writing all these caption boxes.
The inner monologue,
yeah,
right?
This kind of inner monologue. He liked the idea that Batman could actually discuss a case with someone. And this is before Alfred was invented, so, you know, there was also this idea of balance that, you know, he didn't want the stories to be too dark or Batman to be, you know, darker seeming than the villains he faced. So you bring in the presence of a kid who's pretty optimistic, pretty idealistic, and the fact that Batman would accompany this kid and consider him a friend balances him out. It shows you that he's still a good guy at heart.
Well, it's also a business decision, right? Because, you know, you bring in a kid, and Hollywood and all forms of entertainment have often thought if kids see a kid, they'll relate to it more.
Which was finally the biggest reason about it was, you know, maybe kids can't relate to Batman exactly. You know, they like Batman, but they're probably not going to think in terms like Batman does when he sees a situation. Whereas Robin would act like a kid and would kind of grimace and point out the absurdity of the situation at times.
Yeah, and also it worked. Sales really doubled, right?
Oh yeah, sales took off. And again, this is less than a year after Batman first showed up, so it's not like he was jumping the shark. The character was still evolving. And I think one thing that some people forget when they're just like, well, why would he travel around with a kid and who's, you know, dressed as a bird? Like, he's not actually supposed to be Robin the bird. He's supposed to be Robin Hood.
I heard that. Like, Bill Finger really liked Robin Hood growing up, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And if you look at the outfit and you consider movies at the time of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn and all, he's basically wearing the same kind of outfit.
So I think also something that we should take a little bit of a side trip now is that I think that because of the light tone we were talking about, this is where the Batman is gay stuff kind of comes from.
Part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Frederick Wertham, who today is famous for having almost brought down the comic book industry with his whole smear campaign in the 50s, has basically a whole chapter dedicated to, I think Batman and Robin are gay.
Yeah.
Which, if you read the stories, is really not the intention at all. It's a mentor-student role. It's at times older brother.
Well, I think the problem comes from just being a little bit misguided in the way it's portrayed. Like, if you look back at old panels, there's like Bruce and Dick in bed together, like getting up in the morning, they're like, time for the day. And there's that famous thing where he's like, oh, and he just bumps into Robin. And of course it was to distract him from Catwoman escaping at the time.
Well, also, it's a matter of adult readers. Today, most comic book readers are older people, whereas at the time, they were really writing for kids.
That's an excellent point.
That's another thing of just like, oh, the subtext we're putting in. No, they're not, because no 8-year-old was going to pick up on subtext.
They just think it's a fun sleepover with Batman.
Exactly,
right?
Which was the intention of just like, we're making some stuff for kids.
And also, I think because the media kept the lid on some of the more horrible crimes, I think that people weren't as aware back, when Batman was around, when it was introduced, of the things that happened. Like today, you immediately think of that stuff, but it's a lot more innocent.
Yeah.
That issue of homosexuality, I think, has plagued Robin with the mainstream media since that was brought up. That's been what's holding the character back from the mainstream.
I think a big part of what holds the character back today, as we've, I think, lessened homophobia in pop culture, there's still the issue of he does seem to stand out from the rest of the Batman world, because it is still a dark character, even if he's friendlier.
Yes.
It's still a dark character. He lives in a very dark world, increasingly dark, with video games like Arkham City and Arkham Asylum, and films like The Dark Knight really showcasing the madness and the violence of Gotham. It seems for some people increasingly bizarre to then have a colorful teenager who's a laughing daredevil hang out there.
Why introduce a child into that environment? And when you say that, it really underlines how smart Grant Morrison was to create this new kind of Robin with Damian Wayne.
Right, with Damian Wayne, the current Robin, you basically have someone who's been raised an assassin originally.
Yes, a child assassin.
Yeah, he's a child assassin. I mean, his biggest thing is not learning how do I fight criminals, it's how do I not kill criminals, because that's his impulse. So this is a child of violence who Batman is trying to kind of guide to a more moral path.
Yeah, so Dick Grayson eventually at some point stops being Robin.
Yeah, and Dick Grayson had about, almost 50 years in the role. Dick Grayson had been around for decades, and he'd start off as a competent, laughing circus daredevil who was actually really cool. And then unfortunately, as comic books became more censored and you started realizing, oh my God, we're having stories where a child is risking his life against serial killers and bank robbers, he started just becoming what I think a lot of people still think of as Dick Grayson, this boy target who gets kidnapped.
The boy hostage.
The boy hostage. He works as a distraction. Maybe Batman put him in bright colors to be a target, luring other people away. This is the idea that people
Robin,
came up with.
Go over there, Robin.
And in the early 80s, they'd done it for a few years by that point. Dick had basically grown up. He was going to college.
But he was
on his own.
still wearing the Robin outfit, which I think also hurt him a little bit. He still had like the pixie shorts on and the pixie boots.
Yeah, I mean, really, if he just like worn green trousers, I think a lot of people
would have been
Robin. Much easier on him. But in the early 80s, by then he'd been leading the Teen Titans for a while.
Establishing it.
Yeah. And he was really coming into his own, so it just seemed like, well, what 19-year-old wants to still live in his father's shadow? What 19-year-old wants to be identified with an identity he's had since he was 13?
Oh, totally, yeah.
So he left behind the Robin identity, and a few months later took the name of an identity Superman had briefly used and called himself Nightwing.
Yeah, he was hugely popular. I mean, along with the whole Teen Titans run with George Perez, but he was just extremely popular character to this day. I mean, there was the rumor that Dan DiDio had wanted to kill him off.
Yeah, during Infinite Crisis.
Yeah, he was like, I'm going to kill Nightwing, and it was just decided the character was too popular.
Yeah, no, people were just like, wait, even if my parents don't know who, Nightwing is, people know who Dick Grayson is. People grew up on this character for generations. You can't get rid of him. And becoming Nightwing was huge for so many people because it was the symbol of, A, the comic books are evolving, which a lot of comics you don't see that.
Yeah, time passes.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing was that, he was kind of evolving with the readers. Like, oh, we got older and so did
That's
Dick,
nice.
and he's on the journey with us.
No, I agree. And also it expands the Bat family. It creates the family. It's not just these two guys, but it's a whole, Bruce Wayne has created this other kind of family for himself. And also I think the Nightwing title sells very nicely. the Bat family has the most titles because I think it also has one of the most diverse character lineups.
And they're all pretty interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
his apprentices keep standing on their own enough that people can read about the different Robins and different incarnations without Batman needing to be there.
And even though they look alike, they're
Yeah.
all very different. But it was interesting because Jason Todd at first didn't look like the Robins, right?
Right,
Yeah.
originally Jason Todd had this kind of reddish or like copper blonde hair. And he was initially just another circus boy whose parents had died conveniently.
What are the odds?
Yeah, so he was basically like Dick Grayson light.
That's funny.
And he was even perhaps more innocent than Dick Grayson was. There was like one issue where he realized, he liked a girl who was smoking pot. Oh no, like what does that mean morally?
It's particularly funny considering what Jason Todd became.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So after the Crisis in the mid-'80s, the Crisis caused a reboot through a lot of DC history.
It was almost like New 52.
Yeah.
Yes.
If it was maybe slightly more organized from what we're seeing of some of the New 52. But Jason Todd was reinterpreted as, well, here's someone who could never be confused with Dick Grayson. So here's a street kid who, his mom died some years back. His father was a criminal who vanished on him. And now here he was trying to steal the tires off the Batmobile.
Famously stealing the tires, right.
And he wasn't afraid of Batman, and he had this natural fighter's instinct that was so full of rage. So if anything, he was actually more like young Bruce Wayne than Dick was.
Well, that's true, but I think Batman should have realized the red flags. He should have been like, this kid's rabid. Because Jason Todd became a problem.
Yes.
Robin.
Yeah, absolutely. That became his new identity. He was the rebellious Robin and slightly violent Robin. And
not in a fun way, kind of like in a disrespecting your elders way.
Right. I mean, with Damian, they've really played up the fun and the brattiness of the character.
And the feeling of entitlement. And also you understand where it's coming from. This was just some punk kid who didn't respect Batman.
Right. I mean, somehow we're kind of willing to forgive part of Damian's behavior because of his bizarre upbringing.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's about 10 years old. So he's got some issues that he's overcompensating
And he's witty.
for. And he's very witty.
Yeah.
Whereas Jason Todd, the way they played it, it just didn't work right with readers. Readers just saw him as, this guy isn't really Robin, or Batman shouldn't trust him.
Yeah.
And so eventually they decided to help promote the comics, do what they now call the stunt, which was they ended a comic with Jason in possibly a deadly situation, and you had to call up one of two hotlines, voting, and then that would determine if Jason would survive in the next issue.
And it was a huge event. Like the media really caught on to it. It was like a really, really big deal. Like kind of attention you wish comics would get.
Absolutely, because I mean the main reason why it got attention was after the fact because Jason died.
Yes.
And actually Denny O'Neil has talked a few times about he now believes that it wasn't quite a fair vote.
Well, it was rigged. Yeah.
And it was rigged because there turned out to be a guy who just really hated Jason and set up one of those machines that automatically dials.
He was the grandfather of internet rage.
Basically,
right?
And he was able to set up a machine that kept dialing into the kill him number. And if that's true, then that could have been what set it off because it was a really narrow margin that Jason died by.
Well, it's crazy because it was only about 5,000 or 6,000 votes each. So for a huge media event, and there are millions of people in the country, it's always interesting to see how few people actually become engaged.
Right.
Sometimes with something like this. So, but it was a very slim margin. Apparently, this guy won out.
Yeah.
And Jason Todd is killed, which actually is the best thing that ever happened to his character.
It was incredibly interesting, not just for suddenly Jason has more impact as a character, but the Batman mythos really changed. There was
for the better.
Yeah, and there was this increasing idea of danger.
Yes.
This isn't a game,
And the wonderful imagery of Jason Todd's Robin uniform in the Batcave has become iconic to the character.
It's a reminder of both Jason's failure to survive that battle, but also a reminder to Batman, not everyone is cut out for this. You just being trained by you isn't enough. It has to be in them.
Yeah.
And that was a fantastic thing. It's also really the only time in the comics, in the mainstream comics, that Batman has shown signs of PTSD in a very serious way. Because after that, he went into this vengeful mood, and he was very dark and very driven towards violence, not just avenging people, but actually having revenge.
Well, I think that and what happened to Barbara Gordon. That kind of dark tragedy, I think, has helped him more than maybe perhaps other character families.
There's also a big sign of the grim and gritty 80s.
Yes.
That was happening in this post-Dark Knight Returns, post-Watchmen world. And this is where Tim Drake eventually stepped in as someone who hadn't lost his parents. He was a kid who was really smart. and had figured out Bruce Wayne is Batman. And he also figured out something's wrong here, and I think you need a Robin to balance you. You need someone to remind you this is worth it.
Well, also, he's not a fighter. He's a detective.
Right, he's a detective and a hacker.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, you have a situation where you play up Batman's detective skills. I mean, and Tim Drake doesn't admire Batman for being a crime fighter so much and his skills in beating up criminals, but his detective skills.
Right.
And so it's always said that he wants to become the world's greatest detective and surpass Batman. And I think it hasn't been said Batman said, I think that you can do it.
No, absolutely, right. Absolutely. And Tim's natural ability and his eagerness to do good. He wasn't after vengeance. He wasn't even after thrills or anything, as Dick sometimes was. He just wanted to help Batman be a better Batman. And then that got switched around where eventually he winds up talking his way into becoming the new Robin. It hadn't been his intention, but it was actually Dick Grayson's idea, which I think is another big reason why the character was accepted, is that you had Dick Grayson's blessing. And
he was already Nightwing, so you weren't like, why doesn't Dick Grayson come back and be Robin? You're like, no, I like him where he is.
Right.
Let's have a new Robin. And so Tim Drake was popular enough to be the first Robin of its solo title.
Yeah, he had a bunch of miniseries right after each other, and finally they're just like, give him a book. and that was huge.
Perhaps that's because he's such a well-balanced character. He's not just a fighter, he's not just a sidekick, he's his own mini Batman almost.
And the fact that he wasn't living with Bruce Wayne, he wasn't adopted by Bruce Wayne, meant you could give him his own separate supporting characters that never had to collide with the Wayne Manor people.
That's great, yeah. So he comes along, he's Robin for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, Tim does have an absence from the role. His father then, eventually found out you're Robin, wasn't cool with it, told him to get out of the costume role. And so for a while, we finally got our official mainstream female Robin.
Oh, yes.
Stephanie Brown.
Spoiler, who we just talked about in the show last week.
Yeah.
And that she was Tim Drake's on and off girlfriend.
Yeah. I mean, she was a romantic interest, and at first Tim had a girlfriend, and then he didn't, and they always had a very interesting relationship. But she was very upfront when they first met of, I think you're pretty cute. And
well, she was a little bit too flirty for her own good, because she's also had a child and had to give it up for adoption.
Right, like everyone else, they had to bring in some drama into her life, because comics are drama.
Yeah, so she was a very interesting Robin. I think she was an ode to Carrie Kelly.
A little bit, yeah. Carrie Kelly had been the female Robin of Dark Knight Returns. Stephanie, I think, was a stronger character than Carrie Kelly, because Carrie Kelly just kind of stepped into the role. She helped out Batman one day, and he kind of immediately embraced her.
Well, yeah,
and was there.
And I also think Carrie Kelly was more of just a stunt, like a female Robin.
Right.
This is crazy. Okay, we're done with the character. That's all she needs to be.
Right. You actually know very little about Carrie Kelly.
And
she's
really
fun.
She's very fun. She has a great look.
Yeah.
But she doesn't also really add anything to Batman. She goes back to almost the girl hostage, I think, feeling.
I can see that. Also, she basically just wore Dick Grayson's costume, whereas Stephanie Brown, even though she admired Tim so much and followed his basic model, this was her look. Like she made the Robin a female outfit.
But she was so short-lived as Robin.
She was, and actually to this day, like there seems to be an attitude of forgetting she was ever Robin.
Yeah,
which I'm against, because it's yes, she was short-lived, but she served in the role and she did it pretty nicely until she ended.
Well, I think the reason she gets that feeling, or at least I always kind of forget too, okay, is that it almost feels like she was only put in place to set up Batman War Games. Like, it was not ever intended for her to be Robin for any significant amount of time. It was just like, this is the first domino to like this huge event. So Stephanie, she was a little bit like Jason Todd. She messed up a lot. She had a lot of attitude.
Difference was her heart was in the right place.
Yes, she was a nice person.
And she also, any screw up she made, I think she made up for later when she got to continue a spoiler and then be Batgirl for a while, because she was an awesome Batgirl.
She was a much better Batgirl. I liked her a lot as Batgirl. Yeah. So what happens in War Games is she takes one of Batman's like contingency plans,
right?
Because those get him in trouble. He should lock those up better. They have the whole Tower of Babel thing.
Right.
And so she like sets all the gangs in Gotham against each other, and it goes, of course, horribly wrong, and she ends up being killed.
Right.
Another Robin dies.
Right. And originally it was supposed to be killed.
Yeah.
And then they almost like swept her under the rug because she didn't get like even a spoiler costume like on display in the cave or anything. And
he was like, we can't have two costumes in here.
Right.
No one's gonna sign up.
Right. So. After a while, they brought her back. Like, no, I faked my death. Oh, okay. Just kidding.
Yeah, they were like, Leslie Tompkins took her to Africa or something.
Right.
It was like, because Leslie Tompkins apparently turned against Batman. And so that was I didn't like that so much. I liked the character much more as Batgirl.
Yes.
So Tim Drake goes back to being Robin.
Yes, and then eventually becomes Red Robin.
Yes. which I like, and that's who he is now.
Right.
But what happens is he becomes that character because Damian Wayne comes into the picture.
Right, and Damian Wayne is the illegitimate child between Talia and Bruce Wayne. Basically, as we recently had confirmed in Batman Incorporated, there's a very famous story where Ra's al Ghul and Batman fight in the desert, and Batman's shirtless but keeps the mask on, which is a hilarious image to me.
He winks at Talia during the fight. He's like, "You and me later, babe."
And they have a sword fight, and you know, Ra's al Ghul was seemingly defeated.
That's hilarious.
And so Bruce and Talia had a night together, where apparently she might have drugged Bruce. And
it's all up in the air. It could have been a punch by Superboy, but here comes this kid, Damian Wayne.
Yeah, and about 9 years later, in comic book time-wise, Bruce finds out he had a kid.
Yeah.
And now he's a 10-year-old, bit of a brat Robin.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm Robin. I'm his kid. He actually doesn't even challenge Tim Drake. He attacks him in the Batcave and tries to kill him.
Well, that's again, it goes back to the interesting upbringing with... You know, Damian has been raised by assassins, where you ascend by killing the guy in front of you.
Yeah, it seems perfectly normal to him.
Yeah, exactly.
But it does create a situation where Tim Drake just absolutely hates his guts.
Sure.
To this day. I mean, they just hate each other. Everybody else has accepted Damian to some degree.
Right.
But Tim Drake just absolutely can't stand him.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim is kind of like one of the biggest moral centers of the Gotham Batman-centric book.
I like that. That's true.
It makes a lot of sense to me that he just can't abide by Damian.
Yeah. So Damian's the current Robin, so we're up to current times. But before we go into Robin and animation and television and movies, let's just take a second and talk about the Robins, how they stand today, right now in the 52. Their statuses.
Right? So today, Dick Grayson is Nightwing.
Yes, and I like that title.
Yeah.
I think it's very good.
No, Kyle Higgins is doing a really good job with Nightwing.
Great art, too.
Oh, fantastic
Eddie
art.
Barrows. Ugh. And also, I always like Nightwing because he's become a little bit of a ladies' man.
Yes.
And so always has these hilarious situations where he is like very much a male soap opera. He's always meeting attractive female villains, and so that's always a fun thing with his stuff. He always manages to sleep with whoever is in his book.
Well, unlike Bruce, he actually is okay with trying to have relationships with people.
So that's
Jason
a very good
Todd
book. Yeah,
was resurrected, and you can
during Hush,
right? During Hush, and you can see what is apparently now the in-continuity explanation in the movie Under the Red Hood,
and also in the comic book. It was done as a comic book first.
Right.
Right.
Actually, although the comic book now doesn't quite work with the New 52 reality.
That's true. But so basically, what happened was the Superboy Prime Punch, awoke him from his grave, and then Talia dumped him in the Lazarus pit.
Right.
So he has a tie to Talia too, which I find interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's right now working in Red Hood and the Outlaws.
I think his character's improved.
I think his character has improved. There are a lot of people who haven't known what to do with Jason.
Yeah.
But he seems to be improving. I'm curious if he's going to show up in Batman Incorporated in some form. And
I think he and Damian would be great friends.
That would be an interesting, real team up if they could. Right now they just seem to fight whenever they need to. And Tim Drake right now is Red Robin in Teen Titans. DC has recently announced that in the new continuity he was never Robin, That's
very controversial.
It's very controversial because he is the Robin in several cartoons. He's currently in Young Justice Invasion. He's Robin, where Dick was
and he's so many people's Robin.
Right. Even in Arkham City, a very recent, very popular video game, he's there as Robin. And it's not like you can question it. There's a whole video game profile, real name Tim Drake. This is how he became Robin, blah, 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 blah. Also, the fact is there have been comics in the New 52 which have referred to him as a former Robin. So already you're contradicting your new continuity.
Weird. I think I read somewhere the reasoning was he was like, I don't want to be disrespectful of Jason Todd, so I'm going to call myself Red Robin. Maybe that's how they're trying to retcon it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's complicated. But also they've turned the Robin situation in the New 52 into an intern program almost, where you're like Robin for about a year.
Yeah.
And then Batman's like, it's like a franchise operation. He's like, I train you for a year, and then you go fight crime under my name.
Yeah, it's interesting. So then
I don't like Teen Titans very much.
I'm not wild about Teen Titans. I don't think I think there should be fun in Teen Titans, and right now I don't see any fun in it. And then of course, like we said. Damian is the current Robin.
Yes,
in all the main Batman titles.
Yes, and he's great. I really like him. Batman Incorporated and Batman and Robin. He's particularly good. And Stephanie Brown doesn't exist.
Yeah, we can't seem to find her anywhere in the new continuity.
But it's been hinted recently. Dan DiDio just put on Facebook that she doesn't exist yet. So I think she's coming pretty soon.
I mean, we still see her in Batman Incorporated when she was Batgirl, but that's about it.
Yeah, so that's the whole situation with the current Robin title. So Robin, as we said, has had a very hard time transitioning into the mainstream media because everyone always still sees him as that Dick Grayson. Oh, he's too silly. He's a child. Nobody wants a child in their Batman story. And also, the homosexuality angle. Where does he first show up outside of comics?
Oh, right. Outside of comics, Robin first showed up in the movie serials, the 1940s.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, there he was just, it was played for kids anyway, so again, there was an innocence about it. Here's Batman, and here's his young partner Robin, who basically is just, a kid he's looked after.
Yeah.
And they didn't really go into, how did Robin get into Batman's, care or whatever. It's just, this is his young partner. Okay.
It's awesome.
By then there had been so many serials where, people had sidekicks, and it was seen as the same way of like, well, why wouldn't Clark Kent hang out with Jimmy Olsen? They're both there.
Why wouldn't he? Jimmy Olsen's awesome.
Right.
That's hilarious. I like that.
So and then of course you also had in the radio shows, the Superman radio shows, occasionally Batman and Robin would show up and help out with things.
Yeah, the dynamic duo.
Right.
They're famous for that.
Right, and then on television, the first interpretation we got was Burt Ward in the Adam West Show.
Yes, and I think, again, not a huge help because they didn't cast a child; they cast an adult.
Right. I mean, he was a young guy, and actually, if you're going to cast anyone, they cast the right guy because there's a guy who was skilled in acrobatics and gymnastics and had some martial arts training. He had stunt training.
Yeah.
And actually, he had to do a lot more of his stunts than Adam West did because his mask didn't cover enough of his face. So, they had to keep putting him into these weird situations because people are going to see if it's not you.
That's fantastic. And also, this is where they really cemented the old, holy heart attack, Batman. And,
right.
So that's where that comes from. And also, I think, holds back the character just a little bit.
Well, right. It's again, people will look at things from the past without remembering what audience was it for and was it a product of the times, which is what the Batman and Robin show was.
It was popular. It was on the air.
It was incredibly
for a
popular.
long time.
Yeah, I mean it was on for a few seasons, and the fact was it was played for camp. It was meant to be a half-hour comedy show. So yeah, he's silly and all. He's supposed to be silly.
Yeah. So then he's huge in animation.
Yes.
Robin. In the Batman animated series, portrayed quite well.
Yeah, and they gave him the Tim Drake look because that was the look people could take seriously.
Yes, and because no one wants anyone in pixie shorts.
Right.
But then they even went through the whole lineup. He graduated to Nightwing in the animated series.
Yeah, which was huge.
Yeah.
When I was a kid watching that cartoon, that was huge. Like, oh my God, we actually did the Nightwing storyline, and now Tim Drake is Robin.
It was great.
We never thought that was going to happen. We always figured every adaptation is just going to talk about Dick because it's easier.
But they skipped Jason Todd.
Right.
And they went right to Tim Drake, who I actually very much liked in the new Batman animated adventures when they restylized it. He was a great character. I thought he was very interesting. Great voice work.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is, I think, crucial to that character.
And then you had in The Batman, eventually Robin shows up. And even before that, in Teen Titans, the very popular Teen Titans cartoon.
Extremely popular. I think that Teen Titans works so well for Robin, the Robin character, because it makes him really emphasizes his mini Batman-ness. He's always the leader of those teams.
Right.
He has a relationship with Starfire that everybody likes. That's the great romance for him. And also, he's very popular in Young Justice. I think both in Teen Titans and Young Justice, Dick Grayson is darker.
He is. I mean, he's played a little more older than he was in the very original stories.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But even in Young Justice, I mean, he's 13 and very clearly the young, immature kid of the team. But you put him in.
Oh, I see. Yeah, in the leadership position, he grows.
Right. But at the same time, so much of it is just the visual. You put him in a black cape with black trousers. People take him more seriously than completely
totally
yellow
agree.
cape and green shorts.
Yeah, and he becomes Nightwing in Young Justice as well.
Right, in Young Justice Invasion, we're seeing that he is Nightwing and Tim Drake is new Robin. And again, it's so cool to literally see a growth and maturation of a character.
Oh, totally. And then I think that in addition to the problems from the 60s and also when he was first introduced in the 40s, you have this problem with Joel Schumacher.
Right, Joel Schumacher wasn't doing the character any favors. First of all, the costume's ridiculous with the now famous rubber nipples.
And cod pieces.
The coloring is very strange because Joel Schumacher's Robin has maroon and forest green.
And also, it's odd that Bruce Wayne adopts a full-grown man.
Yeah, I mean, he's supposed to be like, even if he's in his late teens, you know,
he doesn't need to be. He doesn't need to become a ward.
Yeah, like everyone's looking at it like, what is this 23-year-old guy? Like,
yeah,
oh, I'm looking after you. He can stay with me. Why would he stay with you?
That always bothered me when I was watching Batman Forever. I was like, he's an adult. He's fine.
Yeah, he can ride a motorcycle and just go off on his own.
Yeah.
He seems like a smart guy. I'm sure he can earn a living.
Totally. So Christopher Nolan, Robin has such a bad reputation at this point that Christopher Nolan went on record saying, I don't want Robin in my trilogy.
Yeah.
He was really adamant about it.
Well, again, Christopher Nolan was also setting up a very specific universe that was very, very grounded in a more, I hate to use the term realistic, but it was a more realistic reality.
And would it be unlikely that you would take a child into that situation?
Right, this is not an exaggerated reality where certain things are accepted. You know, this is not a reality that would have Poison Ivy or Mr. Freeze.
Well, I always felt they would, but they would not in their, she wouldn't move plants around.
Right, they wouldn't have powers.
Yes.
You know.
And also, I think that in Christopher Nolan's trilogy, he ended up truncating Batman's run, his career.
Yeah.
Like, there was no time for him to have a partner.
Right. I mean, he's around for a few years. In the next movie, he's retired for about 8 years.
Yeah, so he was no point where he was like, I should expand, you know?
Right.
So, what did you think of the depiction of this multiple Robins in one?
You know, I think for Chris Nolan's universe, this version works. There are a couple of differences I would have liked to have seen made just to make him closer to an identifiable Robin. In the comics, Dick Grayson actually did become a cop for a while.
Yes, on Bloodhaven.
Yeah, and I would have liked to, you know, there's a whole thing of like, what is his real name? What's his birth name? I would have liked it if it were just Richard Grayson.
Yes, I would have preferred that.
Or even Richard Drake or something, if you're going to go with that kind of, he's a combination character. And I agree with, because of the way the film went, because Batman is supposed to be a unique character in this, I'm okay with him not quite putting on the suit or anything. I still would have liked a nod to it, even if it was just as simple as him wearing, you know, a red hoodie and a mask at one point and helping Batman out. On a rooftop or something. You know, I think Arkham City...
great Robin costume, by the way.
And Arkham City's design is this beautiful halfway point between the exaggerated comic book reality and Chris Nolan's very, very grounded reality. And the way they do Robin, as far as I was concerned, I was like, well, okay, Robin can be in a movie now. You've proven to me that Robin can be in a movie.
And he would be cool. And I think that, as I said in my review of this, I felt that the whole story of John Blake was rushed. You know, he basically just had a monologue where he was like, let me tell you how I discovered you were Batman.
Yeah, that was way too rushed for me. I agree with that.
I would have liked to have the emotional journey. I would have liked to see them team up more.
Right.
I do feel he was the most like Tim Drake because of his detective skills.
Yeah, and again, the moral center. He wasn't quite the daredevil that Dick Grayson was.
Totally.
He wasn't the punk Jason Todd was, though he had some of Jason's past elements.
Yeah, I'll never forget when he swings through that waterfall at the end.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. And even the way he's dressed in that scene, he looks like a Nightwing character.
No, he looked fantastic.
He's all black. Yeah. And so that's the question. That's the big debate. People are like, is he supposed to be the next Batman or is he supposed to be Nightwing? I vote Nightwing.
I mean, I say it goes either way. I tend to think he is becoming Batman just because of, literally it says The Dark Knight rises right after he rises.
Yeah, very literal.
You know, but I mean, I could easily see that character reinterpreting the role for his own purposes. You know, you can go either way, and that's the beauty of the ending. It can go either way. You can come up with your own what happened later.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, there's some discussion whether that should be a Nightwing movie.
That's not. If they do a Nightwing movie, I guarantee it's not going to follow this continuity. Whoever they're going, because it's not going to be Chris Nolan, and whatever new director is going to come in, they're going to want to put their spin on it.
Well, as I talked about earlier this week, I feel that was unfortunate, and I think that if they weren't prepared to go in that direction, I feel maybe they shouldn't have gone there, because nobody likes to be teased.
Oh, that's the thing. It's like it's the end of a trilogy, and Chris Nolan was allowed to do what he wants, and like some stories end with a little bit of a tease or a little bit of like, and who knows what happened later, whether it's never-ending story talking about the adventures happen later.
But I can guarantee you that in Hollywood, some executive goes, let's find out.